Thank you very much. Um, a tough act to follow, and especially when there's a lunch that you're already delayed for, so I'm going to try and keep it as snappy as possible. Um, if we can bring up the deck on screen, I want to first start uh, with a bit about a context about why I'm talking about experiential marketing in a room full of people who are very well conversant with it. And my own premise on this is really based on my experiences in marketing. I've been in marketing for quite a while now, and especially in the travel industry, where I was in hotels with the Taj. Actually, I'd launched the Vivanta brand in 2010, and now with AirAsia. So, been with the Tata Group in travel for a while. And what I've learned in travel is that travel is very intrinsically experiential. And one of the reasons why, for instance, all of us are sitting in this room today, where a digital platform allows all of us to connect into presentations of this nature, is because of the experience of connecting, whether that be connecting people or connecting to different places. All of that stems from this idea that it is experiences that essentially define who we are over a period of time. It's the experiences you collect that make your identity. And it's the travel that you do that allows you those new experiences. So there is something very intrinsic about new experiences and about travel that connects people and places. And that's the learning that I'd like to bring forward into where, when I talk about experiential marketing, is more from the perspective of what experiences are meaningful to individuals and how you can go about being meaningful across the customer journey through the various moments of truth that individuals have when they're interacting with the brand, through the purchase cycle, through the post-purchase cycle, etc. That photograph, of course, dates back to 1932 when J.R.D. Tata, who flew the first plane and heralded civil aviation in the country from Karachi to Mumbai on what then later became Air India, and with some luck, maybe topically might go back full circle at some point of time in the future. But the reason I bring that up is to really talk about how that journey spans over the course of about 100 years and how aviation, as an example, has gone through the vagaries of being experiential and losing out that experience and coming back to where it is. That's the premise I've already spoken about, essentially talking about why travel is experience and why travel is, as they say over here, this is from Hans Christian Andersen, why travel is essentially about living. And how marketing has evolved over the decades. So if you look at sort of the last slide, which is management focus, how over the decades it's moved from being product and scale to being experience and personality. But with the experience and personality, you'll notice that technology has played a big role. And that's one thing worth keeping in mind, because I believe that there is a dichotomy between digital and experiential. And with the majority of spends going towards digital across brands today, and if you look at the touch points in the consumer journey, which used to be very tangible, they've also moved towards digital. So as experiential marketers, it's important for all of us to think about how we continue to maintain an experiential, tangible connect with individuals as brands when the entire customer journey is moving from physical touch points to digital touch points. And both of those are happening at the same time. The move towards experiential and the move towards digital are happening at the same time. And there's somewhere a dichotomy between those, which I'll try and address in a couple of minutes. If you look at where product and commoditization was, which was undifferentiated, versus where experiential is, which is essentially where differentiation needs to come from, stemming from the ability to personalize an experience rather than a commodity. That's where margins are to be made. So that journey from commodities to goods to delivery to experiences, and a majority of the spends from people who have the propensity to spend are now moving towards collecting experiences rather than collecting goods. Even a country like China, which was so focused on luxury goods, Louis Vuitton bags, etc., is also now slowly moving towards spending more on experiences, because as you move on through the journey of an emerging economy to a developed economy, one begins to realize that, as I'd said, you define yourself by the experiences you've had. And the margins are to be made in that high experience zone. And you can look at some products like coffee, for instance, and how the price of coffee has gone as it's moved up that journey from being a commodity to being a good, to being a service, to being an experience. And what coffee used to be when it was coffee beans, say 30 or 40 years ago, to ground coffee in your houses and Nescafe that we all used to have, to what the price of a Starbucks coffee is today, for essentially the same commodity. Because Starbucks themselves looks at the experience of Starbucks as what they're selling and not being salesmen for coffee. And as all products and brands, if you want to be able to make those margins, you need to move up that hierarchy to move from commodity to product to service to experience. And it's ironical that I say this while being in the airline industry, because the same journey that has happened, if you map the price of airline travel across the same time, the price of airline travel has gone inversely downwards and followed the opposite journey. Air travel used to be an experience. It has, in essence, now become a commodity. And it's moved down in the same period from the 1920s, 1930s, when the first slide I showed when J.R.E. Tata flew the plane, to when only the rich had the ability to fly, to now it becoming very sadly a commodity. And that air travel, the beginning of your journey, which is supposed to be experiential, is no longer really an experience in itself like it used to be. And that has had an impact on margins in the airline industry. So if you map the margins of where the large players were who've been in the space for a number of years, on the right bottom corner you'll see where United Airlines, American, Delta, the Western players are. They're all sitting in that space of low margins. High scale, high number of seats, high number of planes, etc., but low margins. On the reverse side, you'll see some of the Asian players, including AirAsia, who I represent, at the top end of that spectrum, where you're making very high margins. And that is essentially because you're re-looking at not just transporting people and not thinking that you're in the transportation business, but looking at how you're able to actually build something that is credible in the customer journey for the individual that they're willing to pay a premium for. In India, the air industry has not really reached that stage yet, which is why you've seen so many failures over the course of the past 5 or 6 years. And that's a journey that should be beginning now in order to not see more failures of this nature. Because if you look at Air India itself as a brand, it's an iconic brand which has been around for a long time. Why has it reached the stage that it is now? It's because it was known across the world. I mean, Singapore Airlines partnered with Air India many, many years before Vistara even happened. But over a period of time, it became like anything else, a commodity. And that's because they didn't focus on the experiential part of it, which is not just how do you market an experience, but how do you make the entire customer journey an experience. And this stems from a premise that is actually put forward by the chief Hall Varian, who is also. He says today's luxury is tomorrow's normality. So you can see what has happened with air travel over the years. It used to be a luxury at one point in time. It's become normalized now and become a commodity. And as it becomes a commodity, obviously the margins decline, industry prices go down, etc., etc. There is a corollary that I'd like to put forward to this, which is in essence that today's normality is also tomorrow's luxury. Because when you look for experiences, experiences are nothing but memory. And memory is nostalgia. So you're willing to pay a premium for a memory that is nostalgia. And nostalgia is what you really need to build upon, because that's what people are looking for when they're trying to interact with the brand and pay a significant premium for it. If you look at Patek Philippe, for example, I mean, watches are primarily redundant in today's day and age. Everybody has a mobile device in their pockets. Nobody really looks at a watch. A number of people are actually wearing watches nowadays which no longer work because of the memory of who gifted it to them or what the individual associated with the watch was. And Patek Philippe has captured that over generations quite well, to say that it's not something that it's not a watch, it's not a commodity. They're saying it's something you preserve for the next generation. What they've been able to capture in all of this is in essence what time is. And experience is essentially made up of time. Your entire life and journey is made up of different micro moments from your birth to your death. And all of that defines how you interact with different brands and different engagements, different people, different places through that journey of micro moments. That nostalgia plays when you look back at the phenomenal increase in sales of vinyl players. Record players have been hitting all-time highs. They're now back at the kind of sales numbers that they were in the 1970s. For 15 years straight, record players have been doing well despite the digitization that has happened. I mean, cassettes, CDs, we've gone through that entire journey. and now vinyls and turntables are back. Uh, Speakeasies like Nightjar in London, which is essentially stems back to the Prohibition era in New York, where you were not allowed to have alcohol, and so people used to go to these places which didn't have any markings, which are almost like private clubs. And that private club journey is coming back into these kind of spaces. People are willing to pay a significant premium to go into a space that no one else is allowed to go into, because there is an exclusivity around an experience. And that journey is something that, I mean, we've tried to capture, for instance, that nostalgia when we associated with Rajnikant, when we did a livery which was dedicated for AirAsia to the film Kabali, which came out in 2016. I don't know if they're able to play this video actually on the screen. It's about a 90-seconder, which is the making of Kabali, but perhaps not. And that meant actually taking that experience across the various different touch points. It's not an engagement activity that you do. You need to take it across from the rational to the emotional to the sensory to the physical and even the spiritual. In saying how do you connect with people, how do you connect with brands, and what is relevant for your brand to be able to connect with the kind of experiences that you want to do. In essence, what were we doing? We were flying people from Bangalore to Chennai to see a film. But it had so much resonance that even after all these years, we've kept that going to the extent that Satyam Cinemas, where the film was launched, we still have hoardings in place over there and still have engagement activities after 3.5 years. So the kind of experiences you need to build are the kind of things that will resonate over a period of time. People still take selfies in front of the plane, which had the Rajnikant livery at that point of time. Because we took that across the various different touch points, whether it was out of home, or boarding passes, props and t-shirts, merchandise. When you do something, you need to essentially be able to invest in it for a long period of time, because the investment in an experience is quite high. So you need to be able to invest in it so that it stays for a long period of time and connects and monetizes over that period of time. Cinema hall, journey to the theater, experiences, post-experience memories. How do you reach out to the individuals who connected with that experience over a period of time? And we did the same thing going back sort of to my first slide with the Pioneer livery. Again, a very nostalgic thing, because coming from the House of Tatas and AirAsia, talking to people about civil aviation, talking to people about JRD Tata, and the connect that this has, the strong resonance this has with people, even again, taking selfies in front of the flight, etc., is something that is very nostalgic to individuals. And we've taken that not just to saying it's a livery alone, but we have taken that into the experience in flight as well. So for example, on the menu, we have Pioneer's Picks. So we worked with the chefs of the Taj to actually look at what dishes JRD Tata used to like, because he was very particular about his cuisine and everything else that he consumed. To have 2 meals on the flight, one is a basa fillet with sauteed vegetables, the other is a cheddar cheese omelette with a beetroot cutlet, etc. To put that on the flight so that you're not doing something which is in a moment of time only. You're building an experience that will last over a period of time that you can, after a point, also start monetizing. We have merchandise based on that, model airplanes with delivery for both Kabali and the Pioneer. So all of those are things that you need to think about when you're curating any single one experience. But the backdrop of it, and this is my closing premise, which is what I'd mentioned, is that you need to string together that divide between the digital and the experiential, because digital in essence is not experiential. Even if you look at the advent of AI, of machine learning, etc., and what the core experience in a place like a hotel was, which is a service industry, the reason you come and connect with a hotel or you travel is because you want to connect with people. And because individuals have empathy, and that is the one differentiation that machine learning or artificial intelligence has with individuals. How do you bring the sense of, and the last panel spoke about, for example, aromas, music, etc., into a world that is at the core of it very binary. It's made up of ones and zeros, and the mental map doesn't process that. So when thinking about how you look at the customer journey, I think one of the things which you're all trying to bridge is these various different dichotomies of the digital and the experiential. So I've got about 45 seconds, I think. Now, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them, but don't want to keep anybody holding on for lunch more than required.